What's up, Taiwan? I'm Liao with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Opposition lawmakers are blocking a proposed $40 billion special defense budget from being reviewed. The president says the budget is necessary to fend off the threat of Chinese invasion, but opposition leaders say much more needs to be discussed. More tanks, more jets, more firepower. That's what President Lai Ching-te wants for Taiwan. He's proposed a record $40 billion special defense budget, saying it's necessary to keep Beijing at bay. China claims Taiwan as part of its territory and has not ruled out taking it by force. Lai announced the plan last week, and the cabinet passed it shortly after. But the bill still needs approval by the opposition-held legislature, which has blocked it from making it to the floor. Kuomintang caucus whip Fu Kunqi says the ruling Democratic Progressive Party is trying to rush the bill through review.
就在今天，要塞进立法院的程序委员会，贸然的要全国人民在完全不知道情况之下，要一个空白的授权。
Now the opposition is putting conditions on moving the bill forward. They want President Lai to report to the legislature on the state of the nation. They say he should clarify the threats China poses to Taiwan and what weapons would be bought with the special budget. And they want him to answer lawmakers' questions. The presidential office says Lai can report on the budget, but it says a Q&A session is unconstitutional.
总统愿意在合法合宪的前提下，到立法院就国政方针以及国防特别预算向国人报告，也争取国会的支持。至于国情报告以即问即答的方式进行，宪法法庭已经判决违宪。
Disagreements over such a report could go on for a while, something one analyst says could play to the KMT's advantage as the party figures out its stance on defense spending.
Now you've got Zheng Miwen, you've got the new KMT chair, who is very much against increasing defense spending. Meanwhile, you've got the presumptive frontrunner to be the standard bearer in the next presidential election for the KMT, Taichung Mayor Liu Xiuyan, who has said that she strongly supports the military.
The opposition may not all be on the same page yet, but it's succeeded so far in keeping the bill from leaving committee. And with the ball now in the legislature's court, compromises may be made. And Lai's special budget could look very different once and if it's approved. Chris Ma and Leslie Liao for TaiwanPlus. A new law requires the U.S. State Department to review its guidelines for relations with Taiwan at least every 5 years. Our reporter Cadence Quaranta explains why this could have big consequences.
U.S. President Donald Trump has just signed into law a bill that could pave the way for deeper ties with Taiwan. It's called the Taiwan Assurance Implementation Act. It requires the U.S. State Department to review U.S. guidelines for how it engages with Taiwan at least every 5 years, and then report to Congress. In those reports, officials must explain how the guidelines deepen U.S.-Taiwan relations and identify ways to lift restrictions on engagement with Taiwan. The law isn't specific about what those restrictions are, but they could involve things like high-level visits to Taiwan by U.S. officials. This law could expand U.S. interactions with Taiwan. One of the bill's co-sponsors says it would strengthen U.S.-Taiwan relations and send a message to China that the U.S. stands against its efforts to dominate the region. Now, it's important to explain that the U.S. doesn't officially recognize Taiwan and instead has diplomatic relations with China. But it does engage with Taiwan unofficially, which is what this bill is referring to. Trump's signing of this bill comes amid some uncertainty about his support for Taiwan. He's recently held calls and even an in-person meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, and they have said they plan to meet again next year. All interactions that have left some worried about what that could mean for Taiwan. But today, Taiwanese officials are celebrating this bill as a win for U.S.-Taiwan relations, with the foreign minister saying this on Wednesday.
对于双方面交往准则，可以彼此更这个完整的互动，包括其中到联邦机关洽公，或者是到我们代表处来这个互动，这个包括台美关系正常化的进一步的发展。 我们表示肯定跟感谢。
Taiwan's presidential office also thanked the U.S. for its support. But China, as expected, is not happy about the new law. Beijing's Taiwan Affairs Office says the bill interferes with China's internal affairs and violates its One China principle. It said it opposes any form of official exchanges between the U.S. and Taiwan. What we'll be looking out for next is what these reports to Congress will say and if they end up advocating for any kind of relaxing of restrictions on U.S. engagement with Taiwan. Klein Wong, Devin Tsai, and Cadence Quaranta for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's foreign minister says he looks forward to reestablishing official diplomatic relations with Honduras.
对于两位对台湾友好的总统候选人，我们也都保持有良好的互动。那我们也期待台湾跟洪都拉斯的关系能够在这个大选之后建立起基于平等互惠一个外交上面的一个关系。
Hondurans went to the polls earlier this week to choose their next president. Early results show the two candidates who have suggested bringing back official ties with Taiwan are currently in the lead. Salvador Nasralla has pledged to restore ties if elected, while Nasri Asfura had said he would move the country away from China. Honduras cut ties with Taiwan in favor of China in 2023, but there's growing disappointment over how that switch has affected the Honduran economy. As of Wednesday morning, Nasralla is slightly ahead with around 72% of the vote counted. Burmese people living in Taiwan and pro-democracy allies are calling on Taiwan's government to reject the results of upcoming elections in Myanmar. They say any vote held by the military junta would not be democratic. Tiffany Wong has more.
Myanmar is set to have its first elections since the military junta took power in a coup in 2021. In December and January, people will vote on who sits in parliament. But here in Taipei, some pro-democracy activists are calling the elections a sham. These activists are saying that the elections are only being used to give legitimacy to the junta, which ousted the democratically elected government. And they're calling on Taiwan's government to reject the results.
这是我们在缅甸里面的所有的县市都是我们有在缅甸的要问卷，这个问卷里面是99%的人是2021年的捐变是完全不支持的、不接受的，98%的人是这个选举是不公平的。 不应该的，98%的人说这个选举是没有解决到我们缅甸的现在的困难的事情。
Myanmar and Taiwan face similar pressures from the authoritarian expansions. Your support for Myanmar migrant workers, your public voice, and your democratic leadership matter greatly for us. We ask Taiwan to reject the military sham elections and its legality.
In a statement to TaiwanPlus, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said it respected Myanmar's sovereignty and that internal issues should be resolved by the Myanmar people. It urged for a peaceful resolution of issues and said it supported international efforts to restore human rights and democracy. Meanwhile, the EU has decided not to send observers, and even the UN Secretary General warned the elections could cause more instability. Human Rights Watch noted the absence of major opposition parties on the ballot, and lawmakers from the US, Japan, New Zealand, and other countries have all called on their respective governments to reject the results. With just a few weeks to go before the first round of votes on December 28th, whether the elections can even be held in conflict-heavy areas remains to be seen. And with armed ethnic groups warning election workers of potential repercussions, it seems that Myanmar's divides will not be so easily resolved. Alex Chen and Tiffany Wong in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan prosecutors are charging Tokyo Electron with national security and trade secrets violation in a case involving chip giant TSMC's most advanced technology. The Japanese-owned company is accused of failing to prevent staff from stealing TSMC's business secrets. It comes after one staff member was charged with conspiring to leak details about TSMC's 2-nanometer technology. Prosecutors say the company could face a fine of up to $3.8 million if convicted. Tokyo Electron in Japan has apologized, saying it will strengthen its regulations to prevent something like this happening again. This case marks Taiwan's first corporate indictment under the National Security Act for the theft of national core critical technology. Our reporter Ai Chi spoke with Dai Zhiyan of SEER about the case's bearing and potential impact on the tech supply chain.
How critical is TSMC's 2-nanometer technology, and how could a possible trade secrets leak impact it?
那第一个就是说，未来的晶片需要兼顾能耗跟效能，所以在这个部分上来看的话呢，它其实需要在制造的过程里面，把这一些晶圆塞进更多的空间上，所以这种2奈米、1奈米的技术对它来讲就很重要。那从市场的需求上来看的话，通讯的晶片、高速运算的晶片，其实这个算力的需求一直都存在，从个人装置到大型的算力中心，它都有。所以我们就发现说，市场其实对这种先进运算的需求是很强劲的。所以在供不应求的情形之下，其实台积电2奈米的这个技术有相当的重要性。其实全世界各国都想要把这一些重要的前瞻的关键技术留在自己手上。那这个留在手上就变成是我们未来如果跟其他国家要谈判，甚至是资源交换的时候手上的一些资源跟筹码。那泄密案有可能造成我们在这方面的一个实力弱化。
How might holding a foreign company like Tokyo Electron liable affect the global semiconductor supply chain?
其实会对于整个半导体的供应链开始有一个警惕的效果，就是说我们现在其实要开始去盘查，不管是从其他公司跳槽过来的员工，或是我们现职的员工，在跟其他的这些公司员工接触的时候，是不是有不当的资讯交换的行为？所以这样的讯号也就代表说，公司其实未来在做，不管是供应商这边的资讯交换，甚至是客户间的资讯交换，其实都需要更慎重的去考虑到营业秘密或是特定技术这种流失或管制的问题，以免遭到这种法律上的一个追诉跟求偿的要求。
That was Dai Zhiyan of SEER. December 3rd is the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. A dozen human rights NGOs gathered in Taipei to mourn a disability rights law they say is dying.
我们在居住、我们在交通无障碍，这些都还难以实现通用设计的这样的一个理想跟权利。那我们要申请辅具、申请长照的服务跟个人助理服务，不断的被排除、限制，甚至费用非常的高昂。那这一些不负责任的行政作为，都是阻断障碍者跟照顾者每一个希望跟每一个机会。
After 15 years of waiting, the group say they're done begging the government for the disability law to respect their most basic needs. They say justice was never served for those who lost their lives to family members or employees serving as caregivers. The perpetrators were often given reduced sentences, and their violence was framed as acts of mercy when the victim's disability was brought up. The group say any discussions of legal changes must include disabled people so that they can decide for themselves.
把原本的服务时数变成了一个项目制，说，长照有洗澡，所以自立生活就不可以重复洗澡的项目。我最近还听到，因为长照可以陪伴就医，所以自立生活的个人助理就不能陪伴就医。我们在谈生活这件事情。我们不是在只谈活着这件事情。
The protest will continue until Thursday, including public speeches and a meeting with the health minister. And thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, we take you to the Louvre for a look at 2 of its recently opened galleries. I'm Liao. Take care and see you next time.